This map shows the demographic distribution of African Americans in 1910. If you look at the markers, 90% of the population lived entirely within the southern states. For decades after the Civil War, millions of black families were locked into sharecropping. This was an agricultural system where farmers rented land and paid the property owner with a portion of their crops. It was designed to keep workers in perpetual debt, making generational wealth accumulation mathematically impossible. Then, an ecological disaster struck. A beetle known as the boll weevil swept through the South in the 1910s and 20s, feeding off cotton buds and devastating the region's primary cash crop. The few agricultural jobs that did exist quickly vanished. The early 20th century South functioned as a closed loop. It was a region engineered to extract cheap labor while simultaneously denying those workers any avenue for economic advancement. Economic entrapment was backed by a rigid legal architecture known as Jim Crow. These state and local laws strictly mandated racial segregation in all public facilities, ensuring African Americans were stripped of political representation and social equality. This hierarchy required continuous, violent enforcement. Between 1882 and 1968, white mobs murdered nearly 3,500 African Americans through lynchings, using public violence to terrorize the black population into submission. Staying in the South meant risking your life on a daily basis. Leaving became an urgent, active pursuit of physical safety and the right to self-determination. When the first wave of migrants began packing their bags, they were making a calculated choice. They were deliberately rejecting a system built to break them. As World War I broke out in Europe, northern factories lost their primary labor supply. European immigration plummeted from over 1 million arrivals in 1914 to barely 300,000 a year later, right as the military draft pulled domestic workers overseas and wartime production accelerated. Facing empty assembly lines, northern corporations sent labor agents deep into the South. They recruited black workers by offering free train tickets and wages that frequently doubled what someone could make picking cotton. Information traveled through networks like the Chicago Defender, a widely read black newspaper. The Defender published job listings and train schedules, framing the North as a promised land and slipping past Southern postal censors to reach eager readers. The North needed bodies to forge steel and pack meat. It provided the exact escape hatch black Southerners had been waiting for. The journey required intense coordination. Families formed migration clubs, pooled their savings to buy tickets at group rates, and moved in strategic, highly organized waves. This map illustrates the geographic logic of the migration. People typically boarded the rail lines closest to their hometowns and traveled straight up the longitude lines to their destinations. Because of these fixed routes, distinct pipelines emerged. Migrants leaving Mississippi funneled directly into Chicago. Those leaving Virginia headed to Philadelphia, while folks from Texas typically rode the lines out west to Los Angeles. Watching their cheap labor supply vanish, white Southern elites panicked. Plantation owners tried to block the exodus by refusing to cash checks sent from the North, while local governments passed vagrancy laws to arrest anyone caught waiting at a train station. Through whispered conversations and shared train schedules, families successfully outmaneuvered a hostile state apparatus, leveraging their own networks to break free. Arriving in cities like Chicago and Detroit meant trading agricultural fields for heavy industrial labor. Migrants stepped right into the grueling, dangerous environments of steel mills, shipyards, and meatpacking plants. They also hit an immediate wall of systemic exclusion. Extreme housing shortages pushed cities to adopt redlining, a discriminatory practice where banks denied mortgages and restricted black residents into overcrowded, highly isolated neighborhoods. Established white working-class populations quickly viewed the new arrivals as a threat to their jobs and neighborhoods. These tensions erupted into deadly violence, peaking in 1919 during the Red Summer, a period of widespread rioting and attacks on black communities across dozens of cities. The North offered double the wages, but it demanded a brutal new kind of survival. Migrants had to carve out their own spaces in deeply divided, heavily contested urban landscapes. Confined to these restricted districts, African Americans built self-sustaining communities. Neighborhoods like Harlem and Chicago's Bronzeville evolved into thriving black metropolises, supporting their own businesses, newspapers, and cultural renaissance. This stool chart shows the sheer scale of the shift. In 1910, 90